The frost had come early to San Antonio, Texas, that December morning in 1876, coating the wooden sidewalks and church steps in a thin layer of ice that sparkled like broken glass under the pale dawn light. Natalie Dawson stood shivering outside the whitewashed Baptist church, her tears freezing on her cheeks as she clutched a crumpled telegram in her trembling hands, the words blurring through her grief, until she could barely make out the message that had shattered her world just hours before. She had nowhere else to go. The boarding house where she had lived for the past 3 months would not take her back without payment, and the telegram informed her that her brother, her only living relative, had died in a mining accident in Colorado. He had been sending her money each month, enough to keep her fed and sheltered while she worked as a seamstress in town. Now that lifeline had been severed, and she stood in the bitter cold wearing only her thin cotton dress and a shawl that did little to ward off the December chill. The church bells had rung for early morning service, but Natalie could not bring herself to go inside. How could she face the congregation when she had nothing, when she was nothing? Her parents had died of fever 2 years ago, leaving her and her brother Thomas to fend for themselves. Thomas had gone west to find fortune in the mines, promising to send for her once he had made enough money. Instead, she received news of his death, and with it, the death of all her hopes. She pressed her back against the cold stone wall of the church and let the sobs come, great heaving cries that tore from her chest and echoed in the empty street. The frost crunched under her worn boots, and she realized distantly that her toes had gone numb. Perhaps she would simply freeze here, she thought. Perhaps that would be easier than facing another day of struggle and loneliness. The sound of horse hooves on the frozen ground made her look up. Through the blur of tears, she saw a tall figure dismounting from a paint horse, his boots hitting the ground with a solid thud. He wore a long coat dusted with frost, and a wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face. As he approached, she could see he was young, perhaps only a few years older than her own 21 years, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of warm coffee. "Miss," he said, his voice low and gentle, "you should not be out here in this cold." Natalie tried to speak, but another sob choked off her words. She turned her face away, ashamed to be seen in such a state by a stranger. The cowboy stepped closer, and she heard the rustle of fabric. When she looked back, he was holding out a clean handkerchief, his expression full of concern. "Let me dry those tears," he said softly. The simple kindness in those words broke something inside her. She took the handkerchief with shaking hands and pressed it to her face, trying to compose herself. The fabric smelled of soap and leather and something indefinably masculine that made her feel oddly safe. "Thank you," she managed to whisper. "I am sorry. I should not be making such a spectacle of myself." "No need to apologize for grief," the cowboy said. He removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders before she could protest. The warmth of it enveloped her immediately, and she realized just how cold she had become. "I am Vincent Everett. I just rode into town this morning, looking for work at one of the ranches nearby. I was hoping to attend the service, but it seems you need help more than I need prayer right now." "Natalie Dawson," she replied, her voice still thick with tears. "I fear I am beyond help, Mr. Everett." "I doubt that very much," Vincent said. He studied her face with an intensity that made her heart skip. "Why don't you tell me what has happened? Sometimes speaking troubles aloud makes them feel less overwhelming." Natalie hesitated. She had learned through hard experience that most people did not want to hear about the problems of a poor seamstress with no family and no prospects. But something in Vincent's steady gaze made her want to trust him. Perhaps it was because he was a stranger, someone who had no reason to judge her or turn her away. Or perhaps it was simply that she was so desperate for human connection that even this small kindness felt like a lifeline. "My brother died," she said finally, holding up the crumpled telegram. "He was all I had left in this world. Without his support, I have no way to pay for my lodging or food. The church might take me in out of charity, but I cannot bear the thought of being a burden to anyone." Vincent's expression softened with sympathy. "That is a heavy burden to carry alone," he said. "But you are not beyond help, Miss Dawson, not by a long measure." "What else can I do?" Natalie asked, and she heard the desperation in her own voice. "I have no skills beyond sewing, and there are already 3 seamstresses in San Antonio who have more experience and better reputations than I do. I have no money, no family, and soon I will have no place to sleep." "You have your life," Vincent said firmly, "and where there is life, there is hope. I know that sounds like empty words right now, but I promise you, things can change faster than you think." Natalie wanted to believe him, but the weight of her circumstances pressed down on her like a physical thing. She pulled his coat tighter around her shoulders and looked away, unable to meet his eyes. "You are very kind to stop and speak with me, Mr. Everett, but I am sure you have your own concerns. You should not let my troubles delay you." "I have nowhere pressing to be," Vincent replied. "And I was raised to help those in need when I can. My mother would have my hide if she knew I had left a lady crying in the frost." He paused, then added, "Have you eaten this morning?" Natalie shook her head. She had not eaten since the previous afternoon, and even that had been only a small portion of bread and cheese. "Then let me buy you breakfast," Vincent said. "There is a restaurant just down the street that I passed on my way here. You can warm up, have a proper meal, and we can talk about what options you might have. No strings attached, Miss Dawson. Just one human being helping another." The offer was so unexpected, so genuinely kind, that Natalie felt fresh tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back and nodded, not trusting her voice to speak without breaking again. Vincent offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it, grateful for the support as her numb feet stumbled on the icy ground. The restaurant was a small establishment with steamy windows, and the smell of coffee and bacon filling the air. Vincent guided her to a table near the wood stove and helped her into a chair before taking the seat across from her. A woman in an apron came over, and Vincent ordered eggs, bacon, biscuits, and coffee for both of them without asking Natalie what she wanted. She was grateful for his decisiveness. Her mind felt too foggy to make even simple choices. As they waited for the food, Vincent removed his hat and set it on the empty chair beside him. In the warm light of the restaurant, Natalie could see him more clearly. He had a strong jaw and a straight nose, with lines around his eyes that suggested he spent most of his time outdoors. His hands were calloused and scarred, the hands of someone who worked hard for his living. But it was his eyes that captured her attention most. They were kind eyes, steady and honest, the sort of eyes that made her think he was a man who kept his word. "Where are you from, Mr. Everett?" she asked, wanting to fill the silence with something other than her own misery. "A ranch up near Austin," Vincent replied. "My father and brothers run cattle there. I am the youngest of 4 sons, and there was not enough work for all of us, so I decided to strike out on my own. I have some money saved, and I am hoping to find work that will let me save more. Eventually, I would like to have my own piece of land." "That sounds like a good dream," Natalie said softly. "Everyone should have dreams," Vincent said. "Even when times are hard, especially when times are hard. Dreams are what keep us moving forward." The food arrived, and Natalie realized just how hungry she was. She tried to eat slowly and with proper manners, but the warm food and strong coffee worked a kind of magic on her body, chasing away some of the cold and despair that had settled into her bones. Vincent ate with the efficient movements of someone used to taking his meals quickly, but he watched her with concern, making sure she finished everything on her plate. "Better?" he asked when they had both finished. "Much better," Natalie admitted. "Thank you, Mr. Everett. You have been very generous to a stranger." "Call me Vincent," he said. "And you are not a stranger anymore. We have broken bread together, which makes us friends at the very least." The word friends warmed her almost as much as the food had. Natalie managed a small smile, the first genuine smile she had felt in days. "Then you must call me Natalie." "Natalie," Vincent repeated, and the way he said her name with a slight emphasis on the second syllable made it sound almost beautiful. "Now, let us talk practically about your situation. You said you are a seamstress. Do you have your tools?" "Yes," Natalie said. "I have a good set of needles, thread, scissors, and some fabric scraps. They are in my room at the boarding house, or at least they were. Mrs. Patterson said she would hold my things for 1 week, but if I cannot pay what I owe by then, she will sell them to cover the debt." "How much do you owe?" Natalie felt her cheeks heat with embarrassment. $3 for this week's rent, plus another $2 I borrowed from her last month when work was scarce. $5, Vincent said thoughtfully. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather pouch. Opening it, he counted out several coins and placed them on the table between them. "Here is $6. Pay off your debt and get your things back." Natalie stared at the money in shock. "I cannot take this," she protested. "You do not know me. What if I cannot pay you back?" "Then consider it a gift," Vincent said simply. "I have enough to get by for a while, and you need it more than I do." "But why would you do this for me?" Natalie asked, bewildered by his generosity. "We only just met." Vincent was quiet for a moment, his gaze turning inward as if he was remembering something painful. "5 years ago my mother fell ill," he said slowly. "We did not have money for a doctor, and we thought we would lose her. A stranger came through our town, a doctor traveling to California. He stopped and treated my mother, refused to take payment, and moved on. He said someone had once helped him when he needed it, and he was paying that kindness forward. My mother lived because of his generosity. I have never forgotten that, and I have tried to live by the same principle. Help when you can, because you never know when you might need help yourself." Natalie felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude rather than despair. She reached out and carefully took the coins from the table, closing her fingers around them. "I will pay you back," she said firmly. "I do not know how or when, but I will. I promise you that, Vincent." "I believe you," Vincent said, and his smile was warm and genuine. "Now, once you have retrieved your things, what is your plan?" "I suppose I will need to find another place to stay," Natalie said. "Somewhere cheaper than Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, and I will need to find more sewing work, though I do not know where." "I might have a suggestion," Vincent said. "When I was riding into town, I passed a large ranch about 5 miles south of here. The sign said it was the Double R Ranch, owned by a man named Robert Reynolds. A spread that size would need someone who can mend clothes, sew buttons, repair tears in work shirts and trousers. Ranch hands are hard on their clothing, and many of them do not have wives to do the mending. You could offer your services there." Natalie considered this. It was a good idea, but the thought of approaching a ranch owner and asking for work made her nervous. What if he turned her away? What if he thought she was not skilled enough? Vincent seemed to sense her hesitation. "I am planning to ride out to the Double R myself this afternoon to ask about work," he said. "If you would like, you could come with me. We could both try our luck together." The offer was tempting, but Natalie hesitated. "I do not have a horse," she said, "and it is 5 miles. I could not walk that far in this cold. "You could ride with me," Vincent suggested. "My horse is strong enough to carry two, and it would be warmer than walking." The thought of riding pressed against Vincent for 5 miles made Natalie's heart beat faster, though she could not say if it was from nervousness or something else. But what choice did she have? If she stayed in San Antonio, she would eventually run out of work and money again. At least at a ranch, there might be steady employment and perhaps even a place to stay. "All right," she said finally. "I will come with you, but first I need to go to the boarding house and settle my account with Mrs. Patterson." "I will walk with you," Vincent said. He stood and placed his hat back on his head, then helped Natalie to her feet. She reluctantly returned his coat, knowing he would need it for the ride to the ranch, and they stepped back out into the cold December morning. The boarding house was only 3 streets away, a narrow 2-story building with peeling paint and a crooked porch. Mrs. Patterson answered Natalie's knock with a sour expression that only deepened when she saw Natalie had returned. "I do not have any more time to give you, Miss Dawson," the older woman said sharply. "I told you that you needed to pay by today or I would sell your things." "I have your money," Natalie said, holding out the coins. $3 for this week's rent and $2 for the debt." "That settles what I owe you." Mrs. Patterson's expression shifted to one of surprise, then suspicion. Her gaze flicked to Vincent, who stood behind Natalie on the porch. "Who is this?" she demanded. "A friend," Natalie said simply. "May I have my belongings, please?" grumbling Mrs. Patterson counted the coins twice, then disappeared into the house. She returned a few minutes later with a small carpet bag containing Natalie's few possessions: her sewing kit, 2 changes of clothing, a hairbrush, and a small Bible that had belonged to her mother. It was a pitifully small collection for a life of 21 years, but Natalie took the bag with gratitude. "You are not welcome back here," Mrs. Patterson said as a parting shot. "I do not need tenants who cannot pay reliably." Natalie bit back a sharp reply and simply turned away. Vincent took the carpet bag from her without asking, and they walked back toward the church where his horse was still tied. "Unpleasant woman," Vincent observed mildly. "She has her own struggles," Natalie said, though she felt no real charity toward Mrs. Patterson at the moment. "Running a boarding house cannot be easy." "That is generous of you," Vincent said. "Not everyone would be so understanding." They reached the paint horse, a beautiful animal with brown and white markings and intelligent eyes. Vincent secured Natalie's carpet bag to the saddle, then mounted in one smooth motion. He reached down to Natalie, and after a moment's hesitation, she took his hand. He pulled her up behind him with surprising ease, and she found herself seated sideways on the horse's rump, her arms wrapped around Vincent's waist to keep from falling. The position was incredibly intimate. Natalie could feel the warmth of Vincent's body through his coat, could smell the scent of leather and horses and clean male sweat. Her heart hammered in her chest, and she was grateful he could not see her face. "Hold on tight," Vincent said, and she felt his voice rumble through his chest. "It is not a long ride, but the ground is slippery." Natalie tightened her grip, pressing closer to his back, and Vincent urged the horse into a walk. They moved through the streets of San Antonio, past adobe buildings and wooden storefronts, past the mission that gave the town its name, and out onto the open road that led south. The landscape was brown and dormant under the winter sky, with patches of frost still clinging to the shadows. Natalie had never been outside of San Antonio since arriving 3 months ago, and she was surprised by how vast the land seemed, how empty and quiet. The only sounds were the steady clip-clop of the horse's hooves and the whisper of wind through the dry grass. They rode in silence for a while, and Natalie found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse's gait. Vincent was a confident rider, guiding the animal with subtle shifts of his weight and gentle touches on the reins. Natalie felt safe with him, safer than she had felt in a long time. "Tell me about your brother," Vincent said after a while. "What was he like?" The question surprised Natalie, but she found she wanted to talk about Thomas. "He was 3 years older than me," she said, "always looking out for me, especially after our parents died. He was kind and hardworking, and he had such dreams. He wanted to make enough money that we could buy a little house somewhere, maybe have a shop where I could sell my sewing and he could do carpentry. He was good with his hands, could build or fix just about anything." "He sounds like a good man," Vincent said. "He was," Natalie agreed, and she felt the familiar ache of loss in her chest. "He should not have gone to the mines. I told him it was dangerous, but he said it was the fastest way to make real money. He promised he would be careful." Her voice broke on the last word, and she fell silent. Vincent reached down and briefly squeezed her hand where it rested on his waist. The gesture was comforting, and Natalie found herself grateful once again for his presence. "What about you?" she asked, wanting to change the subject. "You said you have 3 brothers. Are you close to them?" "Close enough," Vincent said. "We fight like cats in a sack sometimes, but we would do anything for each other. My oldest brother, Victor, is being groomed to take over the ranch when my father retires. The middle 2, Vernon and Vaughn, are twins and thick as thieves. They will probably stay on the ranch as well. But me, I always wanted something different. Not because I do not love my family, but because I want to build something that is mine, you know. Something I can look at and say, I made this with my own 2 hands. "I understand that," Natalie said. "That is what Thomas wanted too, independence, self-sufficiency." "It is a good dream," Vincent said, "and I think it is one worth pursuing even if it is hard." They fell into a comfortable silence again, and Natalie found herself thinking about Vincent's dream of owning his own land. She tried to imagine him as a rancher, building a house and fences, raising cattle or horses. It was easy to picture, and she realized with a start that she could also picture herself in that scene, though she pushed the thought away as soon as it formed. She had only known this man for a few hours. It was foolish to let her imagination run away with her. The Double R Ranch came into view as they crested a low hill. It was an impressive spread, with a large ranch house, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals filled with horses and cattle. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, and Natalie could see several men working around the property. Vincent guided the horse down the hill and toward the ranch house. As they approached, a man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He was middle-aged, with a weathered face and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Can I help you?" he called out. Vincent brought the horse to a stop and dismounted, then helped Natalie down. "I am Vincent Everett," he said. "I am looking for work, and I heard the Double R might be hiring. This is Miss Natalie Dawson. She is a seamstress looking to offer her services." The man looked them over with a critical eye. "I am Robert Reynolds," he said. "I own this ranch. We could use another hand, but I need to know you can do the work. Have you worked cattle before?" "All my life, sir," Vincent said. "I grew up on a ranch near Austin. I can ride, rope, brand, and handle just about any task you need done." Reynolds nodded slowly. "All right. I will give you a trial period. Work starts at dawn and ends at dusk. Pay is $20 a month plus meals and a bunk in the bunkhouse. If you work out, we can talk about permanent employment." "That sounds fair," Vincent said. "Thank you, sir." Reynolds turned his attention to Natalie, and she felt herself straighten under his scrutiny. "A seamstress, you said?" "Yes, sir," Natalie replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I can mend clothes, sew buttons, repair tiers, and do alterations. I have my own tools and materials." "How much do you charge?" Natalie had not thought that far ahead, and she hesitated. Vincent spoke up before she could answer. "Miss Dawson is very skilled," he said, "and she is willing to work for fair prices. Perhaps you could discuss the details with her." Reynolds considered this, then nodded. "My wife handles the household accounts," he said. "Come up to the house and talk to her. If she agrees to hire you, we might be able to offer you a room in the house in exchange for doing the mending and maybe some other household tasks. Maria has been asking for help, and our regular help just left to get married." Relief flooded through Natalie so powerfully that she felt dizzy. A room and steady work. It was more than she had dared hope for. "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds," she said. "I would be very grateful for the opportunity." Reynolds led them toward the ranch house, a sprawling structure with a wide porch and large windows. Inside, the house was warm and well-furnished, with the smell of baking bread filling the air. A woman appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 40, with dark hair streaked with gray and kind eyes. "Maria, this is Miss Natalie Dawson," Reynolds said. "She is a seamstress looking for work. I thought you might want to talk to her about the position we discussed." Maria's face lit up. "Oh, thank goodness," she said. "I have been drowning in mending since Clara left. Come, sit down and we can talk." Reynolds excused himself to show Vincent around the property, and Natalie found herself alone with Maria. The older woman poured 2 cups of tea and sat down at the kitchen table, gesturing for Natalie to join her. "Tell me about your experience," Maria said. Natalie explained her background, her training as a seamstress, and the work she had done in San Antonio. Maria listened attentively, asking occasional questions, and Natalie felt herself relaxing under the woman's warm attention. "You seem like just what we need," Maria said when Natalie had finished. "We have 12 ranch hands, and they are constantly tearing their clothes or losing buttons. My husband and son are no better. I have been trying to keep up with the mending on top of everything else, and I simply cannot manage it all. If you could take over the sewing, it would be a tremendous help." "I would be happy to," Natalie said eagerly. "Good," Maria said. "As Robert mentioned, we can offer you a room here in the house in exchange for doing the mending and helping with some light household tasks. Nothing too strenuous, just perhaps helping with the laundry or preparing vegetables for meals, that sort of thing. And we will pay you $10 a month on top of that. Does that sound acceptable?" $10 a month plus room and board was more than Natalie had been making in San Antonio, and far more than she had expected. "That sounds very generous," she said. "Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds." "Call me Maria," the older woman said with a warm smile. "We are not formal here. Now let me show you to your room and you can get settled in." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a window that looked out over the corrals. There was even a small table and chair where Natalie could set up her sewing. It was simple, but to Natalie, it felt like luxury after the cramped room she had shared with 2 other women at the boarding house. "Lunch will be ready in about an hour," Maria said. "The men eat in the bunkhouse, but you will take your meals with us in the main house. My son Daniel usually joins us when he is not out on the range. I think you will like him. He is about your age." Natalie thanked Maria again and was left alone to unpack her few belongings. As she placed her clothes in the chest of drawers and set up her sewing kit on the small table, she found herself thinking about Vincent. He had changed her life in the space of a few hours, taking her from despair and homelessness to safety and employment. She owed him more than she could ever repay. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Vincent standing in the hallway, his hat in his hands. "I wanted to check on you before I head out to the bunkhouse," he said. "Mrs. Reynolds hired you." "She did," Natalie said, unable to keep the smile from her face. I have a room and steady work. Vincent, I do not know how to thank you. If you had not stopped this morning, if you had not helped me, I do not know what would have become of me." "I am just glad things worked out," Vincent said. "And I am glad we are both staying here. It will be good to have a friendly face around." "Yes," Natalie agreed softly. They stood looking at each other for a long moment, and Natalie felt something pass between them, something warm and tentative and full of possibility. Then Vincent cleared his throat and stepped back. "I should let you settle in," he said. "But maybe I will see you at supper." "I would like that," Natalie said. Vincent smiled, a slow, genuine smile that made her heart skip, and then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Natalie closed the door and leaned against it, her hand pressed to her chest where her heart was beating far too fast. She barely knew this man, she reminded herself. It was gratitude she felt, nothing more. But even as she thought it, she knew it was not entirely true. There was something about Vincent Everett that drew her, something beyond his kindness and generosity. She pushed the thought away and focused on unpacking, but she could not quite suppress the flutter of anticipation in her stomach at the thought of seeing him again at supper. The next few days fell into a comfortable routine. Natalie spent her mornings and afternoons doing mending, working through the enormous pile of torn shirts, split trousers, and worn-out socks that Maria had accumulated. The work was satisfying, and she found herself enjoying the quiet rhythm of needle and thread. In the evenings, she helped Maria with light household tasks and took her meals with the Reynolds family. Daniel Reynolds proved to be a pleasant young man of about 23, with his father's sharp eyes and his mother's warm smile. He was friendly but not overly forward, and Natalie appreciated that he treated her with respect. He often spoke about the ranch and his plans for expanding the cattle operation, and Natalie found his enthusiasm endearing even if she did not fully understand all the details. Vincent came to the main house for supper most evenings, as it was customary for the ranch hands to rotate through meals at the main house so that Robert Reynolds could get to know his workers. Natalie found herself looking forward to these evenings more than she cared to admit. Vincent had a quiet presence that put her at ease, and he often asked about her day or told stories about his work on the ranch. He was fitting in well, and Robert Reynolds had already commented that Vincent was one of the best hands he had hired in years. One evening about a week after they arrived at the Double R, Vincent asked Natalie if she would like to go for a walk after supper. The weather had warmed slightly, and the frost had retreated, leaving the evening mild and pleasant. Natalie accepted, and they walked together toward the horse corrals, watching the animals move restlessly in the fading light. "How are you settling in?" Vincent asked. "Very well," Natalie said. "Maria is wonderful and the work is steady. I feel like I can finally breathe again." "I am glad," Vincent said. "You deserve some peace after what you have been through." They walked in silence for a while, and then Natalie asked, "What about you? Are you happy here?" "I am," Vincent said. "The work is hard but satisfying, and Mr. Reynolds is a fair boss. I am learning a lot, and I am saving money toward my goal of buying land. If I can work here for a year or two, I might have enough to make a down payment on a small spread of my own." "That is wonderful," Natalie said, and she meant it, even as she felt a pang at the thought of Vincent leaving. It was foolish, she told herself. She had no claim on him, no reason to expect him to stay. Vincent must have sensed something in her voice because he stopped walking and turned to face her. "Natalie," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." Her heart began to beat faster. "What is it?" "I have been thinking about you a lot," Vincent said, and she could hear the nervousness in his voice. "More than I probably should, given that we have only known each other a short time, but I cannot help it. You are on my mind when I am working, when I am trying to sleep, all the time." I keep remembering that morning outside the church, how brave you were even in your despair. I keep thinking about how it felt to have you riding behind me, holding on to me. And I wonder if maybe you feel it too, this pull between us." Natalie's breath caught in her throat. She did feel it, had been feeling it since that first morning, but she had not dared to hope that Vincent felt the same way. "I do," she whispered. "I feel it too." Vincent reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and strong around hers. "I do not have much to offer you," he said. "I am just a cowboy with some savings and a dream, but I would like to court you properly if you would allow it. I would like to see where this could go between us." Joy bloomed in Natalie's chest, warm and bright. "I would like that very much," she said. Vincent's smile was radiant. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture so old-fashioned and sweet that it made Natalie's eyes prick with tears. "Then we will take this slow and do it right," he said. "No rushing, no pressure. Just two people getting to know each other and seeing if there could be something real between them." "That sounds perfect," Natalie said. They stood there in the gathering darkness, hands clasped, and Natalie felt a sense of rightness settle over her. Just a week ago, she had been crying in the frost, certain that her life was over. Now she stood under the Texas stars with a good man holding her hand, and the future seemed full of possibility. Over the following weeks, Vincent courted Natalie with an old-fashioned propriety that she found both charming and deeply romantic. He would walk with her in the evenings after supper, and they would talk about everything and nothing. Their childhoods, their dreams, their fears and hopes. He brought her wildflowers that he picked on the range, simple blooms that would have cost nothing, but meant everything because of the thought behind them. He was respectful of her reputation, never pushing for more than she was willing to give, but she could see the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her, could feel the tension in his hand when it brushed against hers. Natalie found herself falling for Vincent more deeply with each passing day. She loved the way he listened when she spoke, truly listened, as if her words were the most important thing in the world. She loved his quiet strength, the way he could gentle a skittish horse or calm a frightened calf with just his voice and his touch. She loved his integrity, the way he always kept his word and treated everyone with respect, from Robert Reynolds to the youngest stable boy. Maria noticed the growing attachment between them and smiled knowingly, but she said nothing, allowing them to find their own way. Daniel teased Vincent good-naturedly about being smitten, but his jokes were kind, and Natalie could tell he approved of the match. Christmas came and went. A quiet celebration at the ranch with a special meal and small gifts exchanged. Vincent gave Natalie a beautiful shawl he had purchased in San Antonio on his day off, soft wool in a deep blue color that brought out her eyes. Natalie gave him a new shirt she had sewn herself, carefully fitted to his measurements and embroidered with his initials on the cuff. The gifts were simple but meaningful, tokens of growing affection. As winter gave way to early spring, Vincent became more open about his feelings. He held her hand now whenever they walked together, and he spoke more freely about his plans for the future, plans that increasingly seemed to include her. One evening in late February, they sat together on the porch of the main house, watching the sun set over the prairie. Vincent was quiet, and Natalie could sense that something was on his mind. "What are you thinking about?" she asked gently. Vincent turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I am thinking about how my life has changed since that morning in December," he said. "I rode into San Antonio looking for work, and I found so much more than that. I found you, Natalie, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it anymore." Natalie's heart began to race. "Vincent," she whispered. "I know it has only been a few months," Vincent continued, "but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Natalie. I love your strength, your kindness, your determination. I love the way you smile when you are concentrating on your sewing. I love the sound of your laugh. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy." Tears spilled down Natalie's cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "I love you too," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "I have loved you for weeks now, but I was afraid to say it. I was afraid it was too soon, that you might not feel the same way." "I feel the same way," Vincent said firmly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Opening it, he revealed a simple gold ring set with a small garnet. "This was my grandmother's ring," he said. "My mother gave it to me before I left home, told me to save it for when I found the right woman. Natalie Dawson, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and let me love you for the rest of our days?" "Yes," Natalie said without hesitation. "Yes, Vincent, I will marry you." Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her for the first time. It was a gentle kiss, tender and sweet, but it held the promise of passion and devotion. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and smiling. "I will talk to Mr. Reynolds tomorrow," Vincent said. "Ask him if we can use the ranch for the wedding. I want to do this properly, give you a real wedding with witnesses and a preacher." "That sounds wonderful," Natalie said. She looked down at the ring on her finger, marveling at how her life had changed. 4 months ago, she had been crying in the frost outside a church, certain that she had nothing left to live for. Now she was engaged to a man she loved with all her heart, a man who loved her in return. Robert and Maria Reynolds were thrilled with the news of the engagement. Maria immediately began planning the wedding, insisting that it should be held at the ranch in late April when the wildflowers would be in bloom. Natalie tried to protest that it was too much trouble, but Maria waved away her concerns. "You are like family now," Maria said warmly, "and family deserves a proper celebration. Besides, it will be good for the ranch to have a wedding. It has been too long since we had something happy to celebrate." The next 2 months passed in a flurry of preparations. Natalie sewed her own wedding dress, a simple but elegant gown of cream-colored cotton with lace trim that Maria had given her. She worked on it in the evenings by lamplight, pouring all her hopes and dreams into every stitch. Vincent was busy with his work on the ranch, but he made time every evening to spend with Natalie, and their love continued to deepen. In early April, Vincent's family arrived from Austin for the wedding. His parents, Jonathan and Catherine Everett, were warm and welcoming, and they embraced Natalie as if she were already their daughter. His 3 brothers were boisterous and teasing, but they clearly adored Vincent and were happy to see him so content. "You are good for him," Catherine told Natalie one afternoon as they sat together working on final wedding preparations. "I have never seen Vincent so happy, so settled in himself. You have given him something to build his life around." "He has done the same for me," Natalie said softly. "When he found me that December morning, I had nothing. No family, no hope, no future. He gave me all of that back. He saved me in every way a person can be saved." Catherine reached over and squeezed Natalie's hand. "You saved each other," she said. "That is what true love does. It makes both people better, stronger, more complete." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers across the prairie. Maria and Catherine helped Natalie dress, pinning her dark hair up and securing a simple veil made of netting that had belonged to Maria's grandmother. When Natalie looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman looking back. Her eyes were bright with happiness, her cheeks flushed with excitement. She looked like a bride, like a woman in love, and the transformation took her breath away. The ceremony was held in the ranch yard, with chairs set up for the guests, and an arbor decorated with wildflowers marking the spot where Natalie and Vincent would exchange their vows. The local preacher had made the journey from San Antonio, and most of the ranch hands and neighboring families had come to witness the union. As Natalie walked toward the arbor on Robert Reynolds' arm, he having agreed to give her away in the absence of her own father, she saw Vincent waiting for her. He wore a new suit, dark and well-fitted, and his hair was neatly combed back. But it was his expression that made her eyes fill with tears. He looked at her with such love, such awe, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. When she reached his side, Vincent took her hands in his and smiled down at her. "You are beautiful," he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. "You are handsome," she whispered back, and his smile widened. The preacher began the ceremony, speaking about love and commitment and the sacred bond of marriage. Natalie barely heard the words. She was lost in Vincent's eyes, in the warmth of his hands holding hers, in the knowledge that she was about to bind her life to his forever. When the time came to exchange vows, Vincent spoke first. "I, Vincent Everett, take you, Natalie Dawson, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in sickness and in health, in poverty and in wealth, for as long as we both shall live. You have my heart, my loyalty, and my devotion from this day forward." Natalie's voice trembled as she repeated her own vows. "I, Natalie Dawson, take you, Vincent Everett, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in sickness and in health, in poverty and in wealth, for as long as we both shall live. You saved me when I was lost, and I will spend the rest of my life showing you that your faith in me was not misplaced." The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Vincent kissed her to the cheers and applause of their guests. It was a longer kiss than the one they had shared at their engagement, deeper and more passionate, and when they finally pulled apart, both were flushed and breathless. The celebration that followed was joyous. There was food and music and dancing, with fiddles and guitars playing lively tunes that had everyone clapping and stomping. Vincent danced with Natalie again and again, holding her close and whispering words of love in her ear. She danced with his brothers and with Robert Reynolds and even with the ranch hands, but she always came back to Vincent, drawn to him like a compass needle to north. As evening fell, Vincent and Natalie slipped away from the party. Vincent had spent the past week fixing up a small cabin on the far edge of the ranch property, a place where they could have privacy while they saved money for their own land. Maria had helped Natalie furnish it simply but comfortably, with a bed, a table and chairs, and a small stove for cooking. Vincent carried Natalie over the threshold, and she laughed with delight at the old-fashioned gesture. He set her down gently and closed the door behind them, shutting out the world and leaving just the two of them in the lamplight. "Hello, Mrs. Everett," Vincent said softly, reaching up to remove the pins from her hair and let it fall in dark waves around her shoulders. "Hello, Mr. Everett," Natalie replied, her heart racing as she reached up to unknot his tie. They undressed each other slowly, with trembling hands and soft murmurs, discovering each other for the first time. Vincent was gentle and patient, taking his time to ensure that Natalie felt safe and cherished. There was some pain, as Natalie had expected, but there was also pleasure and intimacy, and a sense of rightness that made her heart sing. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, skin against skin, and Natalie felt more complete than she had ever felt in her life. "I love you," Vincent whispered into her hair. "I love you too," Natalie whispered back. "Always and forever." They fell asleep in each other's arms, and when Natalie woke in the morning to find Vincent beside her, she felt a rush of joy so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. This was her husband, her partner, her love. And she was his wife, cherished and protected and valued. Life at the Double R settled into a new rhythm. Natalie continued her sewing work, but now she did it from the small cabin she shared with Vincent, carrying finished mending up to the main house a few times a week. Vincent worked hard on the ranch, proving himself invaluable to Robert Reynolds. True to his word, Vincent saved every penny he could, and Natalie added her own earnings to their savings. By summer, Natalie realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with both joy and fear. She had always wanted children, but the responsibility of bringing a new life into the world was overwhelming. When she told Vincent, he swept her into his arms and spun her around, his face alight with happiness. "We are going to be parents," he said, wonder in his voice. "Natalie, this is the best news I could have hoped for." "You are not worried?" Natalie asked. "Of course I am worried," Vincent admitted, "but I am more excited than worried. We are going to have a family, Natalie, our own family." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Maria fussed over Natalie, making sure she ate well and did not overwork herself. Vincent became even more protective, insisting that Natalie rest more and let him take on additional household tasks. His tenderness during this time only deepened Natalie's love for him. In late January of 1878, just over a year after they had first met, Natalie went into labor. The birth was long and difficult, and there were moments when Natalie feared she would not survive. But Maria was there, steady and encouraging, and Vincent held her hand and refused to leave her side even when Maria suggested he might be more comfortable waiting elsewhere. Finally, after hours of struggle, their son was born. He was small but healthy, with a powerful set of lungs and a head full of dark hair. Vincent wept openly as he held his son for the first time, cradling the tiny body against his chest with infinite care. "What should we name him?" Natalie asked, exhausted but happy. "Thomas," Vincent said without hesitation, "after your brother so that his name lives on." Natalie's eyes filled with tears. "Thomas Everett," she said softly. "It is perfect." Little Thomas thrived, and Natalie discovered that motherhood suited her. She loved the weight of her son in her arms, the way he looked at her with wide, curious eyes, the sweet baby sounds he made. Vincent was a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son, singing to him and telling him stories even though Thomas was far too young to understand. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, Vincent and Natalie continued to save money. By the time Thomas was 2 years old, they had enough saved for a down payment on a piece of land. Robert Reynolds helped Vincent find a good property about 10 miles from the Double R, a modest spread with good grazing land and a creek running through it. It was not large, but it was theirs, and Vincent threw himself into building their future. With the help of his brothers and some of the ranch hands from the Double R, Vincent built a house, a simple structure but solid and well made. Natalie sewed curtains for the windows and rugs for the floors, making their house into a home. They moved in during the summer of 1880, and Natalie cried as she walked through rooms that belonged to them, that no one could take away. "We did it," Vincent said, pulling her close. "We have our own land, our own home. This is just the beginning, Natalie. We are going to build something wonderful here." And they did. Vincent proved to be an excellent rancher, building their herd slowly but steadily. Natalie continued her sewing work, taking on clients from nearby ranches, and even from San Antonio when word spread about her skill. They worked hard, but they were happy, and their love only grew stronger with each passing year. In 1882, Natalie gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Clara after Maria Reynolds' former helper, a gesture that touched Maria deeply. Clara was a sunny child, with Vincent's warm brown eyes and Natalie's delicate features. Thomas adored his little sister, and Vincent doted on his daughter with a tenderness that made Natalie's heart melt. 2 years later, another son arrived, whom they named Jonathan after Vincent's father. Jonathan was a serious baby, thoughtful and quiet, and he grew into a boy who loved books and learning. Vincent made sure all 3 children learned to read and write, investing in books and hiring a traveling teacher to come to their ranch once a week. Life was not always easy. There were years when the weather was harsh and the cattle died, years when money was tight and they worried about making payments on their land. But they faced every challenge together, supporting each other through the hard times and celebrating together during the good times. As the children grew, the ranch prospered. Vincent expanded their herd and bought additional land. Natalie's sewing business grew to the point where she had to hire a young woman from town to help her keep up with orders. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. Thomas, their eldest, grew into a strong young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Clara became a skilled horsewoman and announced at age 12 that she intended to become a rancher herself someday. Jonathan surprised them all by declaring his intention to become a teacher, wanting to bring education to the rural communities that often went without. Vincent and Natalie supported all their children's dreams, just as they had supported each other's. They taught their children the value of hard work, the importance of kindness, and the power of love to transform lives. One December morning in 1895, nearly 20 years after they had first met, Natalie woke to find frost on the windows. She rose quietly, not wanting to wake Vincent, and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders before going outside to watch the sunrise. The cold air bit at her cheeks, and she was reminded suddenly of that morning so long ago, when she had stood crying in the frost outside the church in San Antonio. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Vincent approaching, his own coat thrown hastily over his nightshirt. "I woke up and you were gone," he said. "I worried." "I am sorry," Natalie said. "I woke early and wanted to watch the sunrise. The frost reminded me of the day we met." Vincent came to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. "That was the luckiest day of my life," he said. "If I had not ridden into San Antonio that morning, if I had not stopped at that church, I never would have found you." "I was so lost that day," Natalie said softly. "I thought my life was over. I could not see any path forward. And then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I had not known how to pray." "You gave my life meaning," Vincent said. "I had dreams before I met you, but they were just dreams. You made them real. You made everything real." Natalie leaned into his warmth, watching the sun paint the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking a chance on a crying woman you did not know?" "Never," Vincent said firmly. "Not for a single moment." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Natalie. You and our children and this life we have built together. I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." They stood together in the frost, just as they had stood together through every joy and sorrow of the past 20 years. Their children were growing up, building their own dreams. Thomas was already talking about starting his own spread on a piece of land adjacent to theirs. Clara had caught the eye of a neighboring rancher's son, a good young man who treated her with respect. Jonathan had been accepted to a teaching college in Austin and would leave in the fall. "We are getting old," Natalie said with a smile. "We are getting older," Vincent corrected. "But not old. We still have many good years ahead of us. What will we do when the children are all grown and gone?" Natalie asked. Vincent turned to face her, his hands coming up to frame her face. "We will do what we have always done," he said. "We will love each other. We will work together. We will build new dreams, and we will remember every single day how lucky we are to have found each other." Natalie rose on her toes and kissed him, a kiss that held 20 years of love and partnership and devotion. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "Come inside," Vincent said. "I will make coffee and we can watch the sunrise from the warmth of our kitchen." They walked back to the house hand in hand, their footprints side by side in the frost. Inside, the house was beginning to wake. They could hear Thomas moving around upstairs, getting ready for the day's work. Clara's light laughter drifted from her room, and Jonathan was probably already reading by lamplight. Vincent made coffee while Natalie started breakfast, and soon the kitchen was filled with the sounds and smells of a family beginning their day. The children came downstairs one by one, each greeting their parents with affection before settling into their morning routines. As Natalie looked around the table at her family, at the strong, handsome man who was her husband, at the 3 beautiful children they had created together, she felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it took her breath away. She thought of that girl who had stood crying in the frost 20 years ago, so certain that her life had no value, no future. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that everything would be all right, that a cowboy would stop and offer her a handkerchief and a kind word, and that simple act of compassion would change everything. But she could not go back, and perhaps that was as it should be. The past had shaped her, but it did not define her. She was defined by the choices she had made after that December morning, by the love she had accepted and given in return, by the family she and Vincent had built together through hard work and devotion. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their children's lives. Thomas married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread and began building his own herd. Clara surprised them all by falling in love with a veterinarian who had recently moved to the area, a kind man who shared her love of horses and supported her dreams of expanding their ranch. Jonathan became a teacher in a small town school and wrote long letters home about his students and his satisfaction in helping young minds grow. Vincent and Natalie became grandparents in 1898, when Thomas and his wife welcomed their first child. Holding her grandson for the first time, Natalie was overwhelmed with emotion. This tiny life was part of a chain that stretched back to that December morning when Vincent had stopped to help a crying woman. If he had ridden past, if he had chosen not to get involved, none of this would exist. No ranch, no children, no grandchildren. The thought was staggering. "What are you thinking?" Vincent asked softly. They were sitting on the porch of Thomas's house, watching the sunset while the new parents rested inside. "I am thinking about how one small choice can change everything," Natalie said. "Your choice to stop that morning in San Antonio created all of this. Thomas, Clara, Jonathan, and now this baby. All of it exists because you chose kindness." "We chose each other," Vincent corrected gently. "You could have turned me away, you could have refused my help, but you did not. You trusted me and you gave me a chance. That choice was just as important as mine." "We saved each other," Natalie said, echoing the words Vincent's mother had spoken so many years ago. "We did," Vincent agreed. He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over their years together. "And I would not change a single thing about our journey, even the hard parts. It all brought us here to this moment, and I am grateful for every step." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Natalie leaned her head on Vincent's shoulder and closed her eyes. She was in her 40s now, with silver beginning to streak her dark hair and lines around her eyes from years of smiling. Vincent's hair was also graying, and his hands were even more scarred and calloused from years of ranch work. But when she looked at him, she still saw the young cowboy who had offered her his handkerchief and his kindness on a cold December morning. More grandchildren followed over the years. Clara and her husband had twins, a boy and a girl, and Jonathan married a fellow teacher and had 2 children of their own. The ranch that Vincent and Natalie had built continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful small operations in the region. They were respected in their community, known for their fairness in business dealings and their generosity to those in need. Vincent never forgot the lesson his mother had taught him about paying kindness forward. When he encountered someone struggling, he helped however he could. He hired hands who were down on their luck and gave them a chance to prove themselves. He extended credit when neighboring ranchers hit hard times. He donated cattle to church fundraisers and contributed to the building of a new school in the nearest town. Natalie followed his example, taking in young women who needed work and teaching them skills that would help them support themselves. She made clothes for families who could not afford to buy them and donated quilts to the church for those in need. Together, they created a legacy of compassion that their children carried forward. In 1905, nearly 30 years after they had first met, Vincent and Natalie celebrated their anniversary with a gathering of family and friends at their ranch. Thomas and his family came, along with Clara and her husband and children, and Jonathan traveled from the town where he taught. Vincent's parents had passed away, but his brothers and their families attended, along with neighbors and friends from throughout the region. Robert and Maria Reynolds, now quite elderly but still sharp and active, made the journey from the Double R. Maria embraced Natalie with tears in her eyes. "Look at what you have built," she said. "When you came to us that day, I saw a frightened girl with no prospects. Now look at you. A successful businesswoman, a wonderful mother, a pillar of the community. I am so proud of you." "I could not have done it without you," Natalie said. "You gave me a chance when I had nothing. You and Robert both. You helped me build the foundation for all of this." "We gave you a job," Maria said. "But you and Vincent built this life together. That was all you." At the celebration, Vincent stood and raised his glass. "I want to thank everyone for coming today," he said. 30 years ago, I was a young cowboy looking for work, and I found something far more valuable. I found love, purpose, and a reason to be a better man. Natalie, you have given me the greatest gift of my life. You have been my partner, my companion, my best friend, and my love for 3 decades. I look forward to however many more years God grants us together." "To Vincent and Natalie," Thomas called out, and the gathering echoed the toast. Natalie felt tears sting her eyes as she looked around at all the people who had gathered to celebrate with them. Her family had grown so large, her life so full. She thought again of that desperate girl crying in the frost, and she sent a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever force had guided Vincent to that church on that particular morning. After the guests had departed and the house was quiet, Vincent and Natalie walked out to watch the stars as they had done countless times over the years. The night was warm, the air filled with the scent of prairie grass and wildflowers. "You remember our wedding night?" Vincent asked softly. "When we first came to the cabin on the Double R, I remember everything about that night," Natalie said, smiling at the memory. "I told you then that I would love you always and forever," Vincent said. 30 years later, that love has only grown deeper and stronger. "You are still the first thing I think of when I wake and the last thing I think of before I sleep. You are still the center of my world." "And you are mine," Natalie said. "You saved my life that December morning, Vincent. Not just by giving me money or helping me find work, but by showing me that I was worth saving. You gave me back my sense of self, my belief that I could have a future worth living." Everything good in my life flows from that moment when you stopped and asked if you could help. We were meant to find each other, Vincent said. I believe that with all my heart. Even if I had not stopped that morning, even if we had missed each other that day, somehow we would have found our way together. Our souls were meant to be joined. They stood together under the vast Texas sky, surrounded by the land they had claimed and the life they had built. The ranch spread out around them, a testament to their hard work and dedication. In the distance, they could see lights from Thomas's house, where their grandchildren were probably being tucked into bed. Clara and her family would leave tomorrow, returning to their own spread. Jonathan would catch the train back to his teaching position. But Vincent and Natalie would remain here, in the home they had created, continuing the work they loved and nurturing the legacy they had built. They were no longer young, but they were strong and healthy, and they had many good years ahead of them. As the years progressed into the new century, Vincent and Natalie watched the world change around them. Automobiles began to appear on the roads, and some ranchers started using trucks instead of wagons. Electricity came to the region, and telephones connected distant communities. The wild west of their youth was becoming civilized, settled, modern. But some things remained constant. The land still demanded hard work and respect. Cattle still needed tending and horses still needed training. And love still required nurturing, patience, and commitment. Vincent and Natalie grew old together with grace and gratitude. They moved a little slower, worked a little less, but their devotion to each other never wavered. They were rarely apart, preferring each other's company to anyone else's. They developed the comfortable rhythms that long married couples share, finishing each other's sentences and communicating with glances and small gestures. Their children remained close, visiting often and bringing the grandchildren to spend time at the ranch. Thomas took over most of the day-to-day operations of the ranch, allowing Vincent to step back and take on more of an advisory role. Clara's veterinary practice with her husband flourished, and they became known throughout the region for their skill with difficult cases. Jonathan's reputation as an excellent teacher grew, and he was eventually promoted to principal of his school. In 1916, 40 years after they had first met, Vincent and Natalie celebrated their anniversary quietly, just the two of them. They were both in their 60s now, their bodies marked by decades of hard work, their hair completely gray. But their eyes still lit up when they looked at each other, and their love remained as strong as ever. They returned to San Antonio for the first time in years, wanting to see the place where their story had begun. The town had grown substantially, with paved streets and electric lights replacing the dirt roads and gas lamps of their youth. The church where Natalie had stood crying that December morning was still there, though it had been expanded and updated. They stood on the church steps, and Natalie felt a strange sense of coming full circle. "This is where it all started," she said softly. "This is where we started," Vincent corrected. He took her hand and raised it to his lips, kissing her knuckles just as he had done so many times over the years. "I will never forget seeing you here, so lost and afraid. I will never forget the courage it took for you to trust me, a stranger with your troubles and your future. I will never forget the kindness in your voice when you said, 'Let me dry those tears,'" Natalie replied. "Those simple words changed my life. They told me that I was not alone, that there was still goodness in the world, that I could still hope for better days." They stood together on the church steps as people passed by, none of them knowing that they were witnessing a moment of profound reflection and gratitude. Finally, Vincent said, "Shall we go home?" "Yes," Natalie said, "let us go home." They returned to their ranch, to the life they had built, and settled back into their comfortable routines. They had good years still ahead of them. Years filled with the laughter of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Years of watching sunrises and sunsets together. Years of quiet contentment. Vincent died peacefully in his sleep in 1924 at the age of 70. Natalie woke that morning to find him still beside her, his face peaceful and free from pain. Though her heart broke at his passing, she was grateful that he had not suffered, that he had been able to live a full and happy life, that they had been granted nearly 50 years together. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives Vincent had touched. Former ranch hands spoke of his fairness and generosity. Neighbors told stories of his willingness to help in times of need. His children and grandchildren shared memories of his love and wisdom. Through it all, Natalie sat quietly, holding the handkerchief he had given her that first morning, the one she had kept all these years as a reminder of how their love had begun. After Vincent's death, Natalie continued to live on the ranch, surrounded by her family. Thomas and his wife moved into the main house with her, and she spent her days sewing, playing with great-grandchildren, and tending the flower garden she had planted years ago. She missed Vincent every moment of every day, but she did not succumb to despair. She had too much to live for, too many people who loved and needed her. She lived for another 8 years, reaching the age of 77. In her final months, she grew increasingly frail, but her mind remained sharp and her spirit strong. She spent her last days surrounded by family, telling stories of her life with Vincent, sharing the wisdom she had gained over decades of love and partnership. On a cold December morning in 1932, 56 years after Vincent had found her crying in the frost, Natalie passed away peacefully. Her children gathered around her bed as she drew her final breaths, and her last words were a whisper of Vincent's name. She was buried beside him on a hill overlooking their ranch, under a headstone that read, "Natalie Dawson Everett, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother." She found love in the frost and built a legacy of compassion. The ranch remained in the family for generations, passed down through Thomas's line. The story of how Vincent and Natalie had met became a family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The handkerchief that Vincent had given Natalie that first morning was preserved as a family treasure, a tangible reminder of how a simple act of kindness could change the course of lives. In the years that followed, the descendants of Vincent and Natalie Everett spread throughout Texas and beyond. But they all carried the legacy of compassion and love that their ancestors had established. They helped their neighbors, supported their communities, and treated all people with dignity and respect. They married for love and built families based on mutual support and devotion. They worked hard, dreamed big, and never forgot where they came from. And sometimes, on cold December mornings when frost covered the ground, the descendants of Vincent and Natalie would pause and remember the story of their great-great-grandparents. They would remember the cowboy who had stopped to help a crying woman outside a church, offering her his handkerchief and saying those fateful words, "Let me dry those tears." They would remember that from that simple act of compassion had flowed generations of love, prosperity, and purpose. The legacy of Vincent and Natalie Everett endured not because they had become wealthy or famous, but because they had shown through their lives what true love looked like. They had demonstrated that love was not just passion and romance, though they had shared plenty of both. Love was also partnership and support, patience and forgiveness, hard work and shared sacrifice. Love was choosing each other every single day, through good times and bad, through prosperity and hardship, through youth and old age. Their love story was not filled with grand dramatic gestures or sweeping adventures. It was a quiet love, a steady love, the kind of love that built foundations and created futures. It was the kind of love that most people aspired to, but that only some were fortunate enough to find. But perhaps the most important part of their legacy was the reminder that love could be found in the most unexpected places, in the darkest moments, when all hope seemed lost. Natalie had been at her lowest point when Vincent found her, certain that her life was over and that she had nothing left to live for. Vincent had been a stranger with no obligation to help her, just a young cowboy passing through town looking for work. But Vincent had chosen to stop. He had chosen to care. And that choice had created ripples that extended far beyond his own life and Natalie's life, touching hundreds of people across multiple generations. Their story was proof that kindness mattered, that compassion could change the world, that one person really could make a difference. In the end, the story of Vincent and Natalie Everett was a love story, yes, but it was also a story about the power of human connection, about the importance of reaching out to those in need, about the courage it takes to accept help and to trust in the possibility of better days ahead. It was a story that began with tears in the frost and ended with a legacy of love that would endure for generations. It was a story of the American West, of hard work and determination, of building something from nothing through sheer will and devotion. But most of all, it was a story of two souls who found each other against all odds and created a life together that was far richer and more beautiful than either could have imagined. And that, in the end, is what made their story worth remembering and retelling, worth preserving and celebrating. It was a reminder that even in the coldest, darkest moments, hope still exists, love still exists, kindness still exists, and sometimes, if we are very lucky, a cowboy will stop and offer to dry our tears and everything will change. The ranch that Vincent and Natalie built still stands today, over a century after they first broke ground. The house has been expanded and modernized, but the original structure remains, carefully preserved by generations of Everetts who understand its significance. The hill where Vincent and Natalie are buried is maintained as a family cemetery, and their descendants still gather there on important occasions to pay their respects and remember the love story that started it all. On the gate leading into the ranch hangs a sign that reads Everett Ranch ESD. 1880, built on love, maintained with pride. It is a fitting tribute to the couple who created not just a successful business but a family legacy based on the principles of hard work, compassion, and unwavering devotion to each other. And sometimes, on cold December mornings when the frost sparkles on the ground like broken glass, the current generation of Everetts will step outside and pause for a moment, thinking of their ancestors. They will think of the crying woman and the kind cowboy, of the handkerchief offered and the tears dried, of the love that bloomed from that simple act of compassion. They will feel grateful for the gift that Vincent and Natalie gave them, the gift of a family built on love, a legacy worth preserving, and a reminder that true love, once found, endures forever. The story of Vincent and Natalie Everett is complete now, a circle closed, a journey finished. From that frost-covered morning in 1876 to this present day, their love has been the foundation upon which generations have built their lives. They found each other when both were lost, saved each other when both needed saving, and created together something that neither could have created alone. Their story is proof that the best love stories are not the ones that burn brightest and fastest, but the ones that burn steady and true, providing warmth and light for a lifetime and beyond. It is proof that kindness matters, that compassion changes lives, that love conquers all. And it all began with a simple act of human decency on a cold December morning, when a cowboy named Vincent Everett saw a woman named Natalie Dawson crying in the frost outside a church and stopped to say, "Let me dry those tears." From that moment, everything changed. Two lives were joined, a family was created, a legacy was born. And though Vincent and Natalie are long gone now, their love lives on in the hearts and lives of their descendants, a testament to the enduring power of love and the importance of choosing kindness, always and in all ways. That is the story of Vincent and Natalie Everett, a love story set in the Wild West, a tale of heartbreak and hope, of despair and devotion, of two souls who found each other against all odds and built a life together that was worth remembering. It is a complete story, with a beginning, a middle, and a satisfying end, leaving no threads untied and no questions unanswered. Their love story is closed now, but its impact continues, rippling outward through time, touching lives that Vincent and Natalie never knew, inspiring people they never met. And that, perhaps, is the greatest legacy of all, to live a life so full of love and purpose that it continues to matter long after you are gone, to create something so beautiful that it endures through the generations, unchanging and unforgettable. Vincent and Natalie Everett did that. They built their love on a foundation of kindness and grew it through patience, dedication, and unwavering commitment to each other. They faced every challenge together and celebrated every triumph together. They raised their children with love and wisdom, taught them the value of hard work and compassion, and gave them a legacy worth preserving. And now, as their story comes to its final close, we can say with certainty that they lived well, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. Their tears were dried, their love was fulfilled, and their legacy is secure. What more could any love story hope to achieve? This is the end of their tale, told in full, with nothing left unsaid and nothing left undone. Vincent and Natalie Everett rest together on their hill, overlooking the ranch they built and the family they created, and their love remains as a beacon of hope for all who hear their story. From frost to forever, from tears to triumph, from strangers to soulmates, this is their story, complete and unchanging, a testament to the power of love to transform lives and create legacies that endure through the ages.